Okay, so we're back, and in this video we are going to look at titles and how to add titles on top of our clips so we get those nice big words that show people on Facebook what the video is actually about and convey the information that you're trying to convey. So we've got a couple clips here. We're going to add some titles to them. And we've got our script here, of course. So we'll add these two titles. So the first thing we're going to do is copy this. And then we are going to go to Title, New Title, and Default Still. And you don't need to change any of this. This should all be fine. You can leave the name Title 05. You're going to have a bunch of titles, so it doesn't make sense to really name them all something special. You can just use the default numbers. Okay, so this is the title creation screen. By default, you will probably start with this text tool selected. So you can just drag a text box wherever you would like it to be and paste your text in. But there are a few things that you should think about when making a title. Okay, so first of all, let's even before we do that, actually, let's pop out of here for a second, and let's take a look at this clip. Remember, we should be looking over here because we're looking at the title for this clip in our timeline. So that's going to be playing over here. So this is the clip that we're adding the title to, and as you can see, there is most of the action is happening in this clip on top of the screen. It's the ambulance up here. That's where things are going on. So we're going to probably want to put our title on the bottom of the screen. Okay, so let's open our title again. It's Title 05. You can see it's just, as soon as you create a title, it will appear over here in your project assets. So okay, here's our title. We've got our text, and we're going to look at two different ways to create titles, two different styles. But they all start pretty much the same way. So we're going to do one thing first regardless, and we're going to change this. We're going to highlight the text. We're going to change the font to PT Sans. And we're going to make it bold. This is just the font that Tech in Asia usually uses. And bold, it'll pop out a little bit more. And then I'm going to drop the size down to maybe, let's say, 80. I would usually, for these videos, if it's a 16:9 video, 720p, I usually try to keep the font size somewhere between 75 and 90 maybe for the regular text. If you're doing the title text, the first the first title of the video, that can be bigger. You want that to be bigger and more like in your face. But the regular text that's telling the story of your video, that should be smaller because you want most of what's on the screen to be the video itself, and you don't want to block off the action that's happening in your clip. Okay, so we've got our PT Sans, we've got our we've got it bold. We've got it in a decent font. Now, let's just switch that to the regular tool. So the two styles that we're going to look at, we'll call one block titles and the other one gradient titles. So those are just names that I made up, but just so we can differentiate them. So let's take a look at the block title first because that's simpler. So for a block title, basically what I'm going to have is I'm going to have this text and then I'm going to have a colored block behind it that's a little bit transparent so that the text pops out from the image in the background more. So, okay, the first thing I'm going to try to do is sort of try to get this so that it's in as much of a rectangular shape as I can get it, so we don't have a huge part sticking out here. So that's, I mean, it's not great. You can't always get perfect matching, and there's no need to make it match perfectly, but that's pretty close. Okay, so now we are going to draw a rectangle. So we're going to click on the rectangle tool up here, and you're going to just draw a rectangle right over your text like that. And when I'm doing a block title, I usually like to make it yellow, that poppy yellow color. So that's FFF700, that's the color code for that. So I'm going to make it that. So now we have our big block, but of course we can't see our text. So we're going to right click on this rectangular block, go down to Arrange, and Send to Back. That sends it to these titles work in layers just like a Photoshop image or whatever. So that makes it the further backmost layer of the title. It doesn't put it behind the clip because the clip's not part of this title, but it makes it the furthest back layer of the title. So now we can see our text. Of course, our text is like a gray color right now. It looks terrible. So we're going to grab our text, click in there, select it all, obviously, so Control A, and then just drag this over, and the color over here, drag that to black. Or, I mean, you could make it whatever color, but we usually use black, so I would make it black. And that is basically it in terms of creating the block title. It's pretty simple. So I would from there you want to maybe trim this up a little bit to get a good fit, the kind of fit that you're looking for. You can make fine adjustments using the arrow keys on your keyboard, and you can hold shift to move the things a little faster. So sometimes that's easier than dragging. You can just control a little better using that. So I'm going to trim this up a little bit maybe. And then I'm going to select both of these together, and I'm just going to drag it down into, let's maybe put it over here so it's not in the way of the actions all up here. So it's nice to have the titles down here. And then the last thing I might do is I'm going to click on the yellow rectangle. I'm going to go over here to opacity, and I'm going to maybe set that to 90. Just so it's got, as you can see, it's got a little bit of transparency, not too much. Like if you put it down to 50 or something, then it doesn't really, it's a little bit, the text doesn't pop out as much. But I like to give it a little bit of transparency, 90, 95, sometimes down to 85, depending on what your background image is. And so once you're done, you've got the title done. You can, you treat it like a regular clip. So you go over here, you click on it, you can drag it onto on top of the clip that you want, and then it's static. Obviously there's no motion in the title, so you can make it as long or as short as you want and nothing changes. So I'm just going to drag this all the way out so that it covers the whole clip. So see, we've got this clip here, the video clip, and then on top of it we've got our title. So we play the video clip, and you can see we've got the clip playing up here and the title appears there. So we may want to add some transitions to that, but for now we've got that going. And it looks pretty good. Okay, so now we need to make a title for the next one, and we'll do another block title, but here is some good news, is the next time you do that, it is going to be a little bit easier. So I just went and I copied the next line of our script. Now I'm going to open this title again. Now be very careful you don't forget this step, otherwise you'll undo your previous work. But so you open the title you just made, go to Title, New Title, and then Based on Current Title. Click OK. See, that's creating title 06. So now we're in title 06. It looks exactly the same as title 05, but it's a new one. It hasn't overwritten 05. So from here, you see we can still see the old clip behind it. So I'm just going to quickly pull this down, drag our little timeline thing over here. So okay, now here's the new clip that our new title is going to go on. And now we can see this over the new title scene. So the video clip that you see in the background when you're making a title is just, it shows you whatever is in the project screen, wherever this red slider is. So put this over the clip that you're adding a title to, and you'll see that clip in the background when you make your title. Okay, so now all we have to do is change this text to the new text that we copied from our script. Now obviously that's not always going to fit perfectly. It might be, in this case it's a little bit longer. In fact, it's a little too long to fit in 2 lines, but I don't want to have 3 lines, so I'm going to go down to size 75. That's fine. And then of course we're going to have to resize this rectangle a little bit to get it to fit properly with text. But it's not too much work. That's also a little bit off center, so maybe we'll try to center this one a little bit. But there you go. So now you have title 05, title 06, and you'll see when we go over here, now we've got our new title on the new clip. So that's block titles, and we will take a look at gradient titles in a second. But before we do, so one thing you probably have noticed is it's a little jarring to not have a transition between these at all. And in fact, because the titles look the same, people may not notice that the words have changed, especially if, in this case, it's a little easier to tell when you go from scene to scene because the yellow boxes are different sizes. But it's always good to have a transition between titles just to kind of emphasize that there's a new title. If you read the last one, now you need to read this next one. So I'm going to use the push transition again, just because I like that one. I'm going to drag it a little bit smaller here, and I'm actually going to pop one in here at the beginning too. So you can use the transition from nothing into a title or from a title into nothing, and that'll work. So now let's watch this again. Watch over here, and you'll see we've got our nice title slides in. Looks nice and smooth. Clip is playing, and then slides over, and we get our new title. So we've got that nice little motion that kind of helps, especially because it matches with that bus a little bit. So we've got some nice motion that really gives us a bit of a clearer transition between the two clips that we're doing. And so, yeah, that's basically it. That's titles. But we want to talk about the other kind of title. So the other sort of title that you can do, and sometimes that's better than a block title, is what I would call a gradient title. So let's make one of those. So I'm going to just make this the old titles that we just made invisible. It's just so that they don't distract us. And we'll go back and we'll make a new version of this Ambulances Aren't as Safe title. So again, we're going to go to title, new title, default still. That's what we're going to do for our first one. We're going to, again, create a text box and paste our text in there. We're going to make sure that it's PT Sans and bold, and maybe we'll pop it down to like size 80. That seems fine. And we might even do that because that seems good too. Now, with a gradient title, usually this text will be white. So one thing to be aware of is this looks white right now. Whoops. This looks white, but it's actually not. For some reason, and this might just be my Premiere Pro, but mine always picks this gray color that's not pure white. Pure white is FFFFFFF. So you want to change that to actual white, and you can see it just brightened up a little bit. So don't let that fool you. Don't forget to change it to real white, or it won't be quite as brilliant. Okay, so now we've got our white text, and that's great, but we need something that's going to make it stick out from the background. Obviously, especially see we've got these white lines in the background. It's just not going to work. It's very hard to read. So again, we're going to create a rectangle, and we're going to drag it all the way across the bottom of the screen like this. We got solid color. Let's make it black. So make it black while it's a solid, but then once you've got your black rectangle, and you can also send it to back if you want. So again, we'll right click on this, arrange, send to back. Okay, now we can read the text, but of course we've blocked a bunch of our screen, a bunch of our clip in the background here. So what we're going to do is, while we still have the rectangle selected, we're going to change this from solid to 4-color gradient. And now we've got this, these are the 4 corners of the rectangle, and we can control what colors are there. And it will arrange them in a gradient-like pattern. So for example, if I wanted to change this one, I could click on that corner, click on this, change the color to red, and see now we've got this nice red into black gradient that's coming from this top left corner up here. But of course we don't want red. That's not what we're trying to do here. What we want to try to do is create a situation where this fades from black into transparent. So the way to do that is we're going to click on these top corners, top right and top left, and we're going to change the color stop opacity up there to 0. So you can see I changed the top right, and now we've got this nice fade. I'm going to do the same thing for the top left. And now we've got a black that slowly fades into transparent. And you can drag this around a little bit to add a little bit more darkness to the bottom. If your text isn't popping enough, you can drag it down. You can play with the size. That looks okay to me, so I'm just going to leave it like that. But you can play with this in a lot of different ways. You can make this, that would be overkill, but you can sort of make it as dark or as light as you want based on what's happening in the background clip and what you need. It's also just nice to note that if you wanted to put your text just in one corner and just have the black sort of coming out from that one corner, you can do this with 3 corners. So I could click on this bottom left corner, or bottom right corner rather, over here, and I could make, so I'm clicking right there, and then I could make that transparent too. And now you see we've got this black fade that's just coming out of here. That doesn't work for a centered title like this, but if you had a title that you wanted to have only in one corner, that would be a good way to make a gradient title out of that. But so for now, I don't want to do that. I'm putting this back to 100. Now, the last thing that I might do here is just add a little bit of emphasis by maybe changing one of these words to yellow. That just makes it pop a little bit more. So this one, I mean, this isn't that exciting a title. There's not a great word that pops out at you, but it's nice to have one of those in every new title, just to have something that jumps out at the viewer a little bit. So there you go. That's how to create a gradient title, and then you drop it in the same way. So I'm just going to, again, I'm going to drop it in. I'm going to drag it over this clip. This is our first clip that we want, and so now we've got our nice title in there. If we want to create the second one, so we need to now create our next title. We are going to do that again the exact same way. So I'm going to click on title 07, the one we just made, then I'm going to go to new title based on current title, and that will create title 08. Now my slider is already over here on the clip I want to use, so that's fine. I'm going to select all of this text. I'm going to paste my new text. I'm going to maybe make this a little smaller. Let's see if that'll fit. Still not fit. But I can make the text box a little bigger. And I think probably squeeze it in there. Yeah. Okay. And then I will pick a word to add some emphasis. Maybe we'll do this. So FFF 700 is the yellow color that pops nicely. Beautiful. And then we drag. So we just drag the new title that we just made, title 08, down there. And again, we've got our titles. We might add a little transition to these if we want to. And there we go. Now, here's the thing that you may have noticed. At the beginning here especially, you can see that black line of your black rectangle sliding in. So for that reason, push isn't a great transition to use with a gradient title, because it just looks a little bit awkward. It doesn't look natural. If you're sliding from title to title, like over here, it looks fine, right? Because this title has the black rectangle, so does this one. So there's no you can't see that clear line in between them. But if you're sliding from nothing into a title or from a title into nothing, you will clearly see that line, and that's kind of awkward. So instead of using push, I might use another title. Another one that I like to use sometimes is slash slide. It's just kind of fun. If we make that nice and quick, we'll get this sort of the title assembling itself like that. That's kind of cool. We can make that even a little longer if we wanted to. And yep, there we go. That's fine. And then we can use push over here. I mean, there's a ton of titles that you could use, right? Another one that I will sometimes use is stretch in. If you make this quick, it looks pretty cool. Yeah, so it just kind of zooms in, and it's really too fast to see. If you were to break it down frame by frame, you might be able to see those lines. Well, I guess not. But so there are, you can play with. There's other transitions as well, but that's just one thing to know about the gradient titles if you're using those. So that is pretty much it for titles. That's how you can make. So that's how you can make the box titles this style, or we can make the gradient titles this style, and that is basically what you need to know for those. So we will leave it at that.